ตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะพุทธังธัมมังสังฆังนัมมัสสามิ Sometimes people look at Buddhist monks and nuns with their shaven heads and their robes, and already they think they must be enlightened. Yesterday I met somebody who came from Stratford-on-Avon in England, where William Shakespeare was born. And they reminded me of when I took Ajahn there many years ago with a group of monks. We were staying with Lumpur Kemadamo at his monastery, and we went over to see the birthplace of Shakespeare. And there was a whole group of tourists outside, a lot of school children and others. And when they saw us walk up, there's about 6 monks in the group. They all left Shakespeare's house and swarmed around us. And they said, "Are you Buddhas?" They seemed very impressed. So I had to say, "No, we're not Buddhas, we're students of the Buddha." But just because you shave your head and you put the robes on doesn't yet mean you're enlightened. We all have our own karmic accumulations, attachments, cravings, ignorance, and the commitment to practice the path, which may lead you to put the robes on and shave your head. Yeah, that's the starting point of the practice, but you still have to work with all these mental defilements. And so if you're a layperson and you're thinking, "Oh, it's easy for those monks, they can practice all day long and they'll get to Nibbana quickly." Well, it's not a sure thing. The practice and the progress in the practice depends on many, many different factors. And a layperson can practice well and maybe even better than a monk if they have their faith and they put effort into the practice. They keep the precepts, devote themselves to developing mindfulness and then investigating the Dhamma, freeing their mind from delusions, greed, anger and delusion. A layperson can progress just as well as a monk or a nun, or even quicker. Sometimes our biggest obstacle is our own doubts and our own self-criticism. When you come on retreat, one of the things that is very common is that when you're at work or in your family, if things are going wrong, you often blame other people for your problems. It's easy, it's the easy way. Blame the boss, blame your co-worker, blame your partner, blame your friend when you have stress or problems. When you come on retreat, you're on your own. So then who have you got left to blame? You blame yourself. And we look at our practice often in a negative light. We notice every blemish and every fault and every weakness and every thought. And already we are making it harder for ourselves from the word go. We see a thought, maybe a negative thought come up, and already we judge ourselves. Oh, look at that, I'm so greedy, or I'm so angry, or I'm so agitated, I'm worried, so disturbed. And Ajahn Chah used to say, we've got to learn to just leave it all alone. Let it be. So thoughts come up, and then what do? They pass away. They arise, they pass away. That's what thoughts do. That's what feelings do. That's what moods do. And they arise and they pass away because they're sankharas, they're not certain. They're conditioned things. The problem is we take them as self. We identify with them. My greed, my anger, my thoughts, my feelings, my emotions. Ajahn Chah used to just learn to leave them alone. Just watch, but don't get involved. They are what they are. The body is just what it is. The body gets older every day, and as it gets older, we don't like what we see in the mirror. But that's the body. The problem comes when we say it's my body. Then we say, I don't like it if we're getting old, or we have aches and pains or sickness. But if you can be mindful and you see the Dhamma, then this sense of self and attachment starts to disappear. So then the body is just the body, or merely the body. Then there's no problem. Body gets old, well, that's what bodies do, but there's no me, there's no person who's getting old. It's not my problem, it's just a body getting old, or a body getting sick, or a body having pain when you sit on the ground for a long time and you get a pain in your knee. Feeling is merely feeling. It's what mindfulness does. It gives you the right perspective on feeling. Pleasure is just pleasure, pain is just pain. When there's mindfulness, you take out this sense of self out of the experience, and it is just what it is. Body, feeling, mental states, positive, negative, wholesome, unwholesome. And then the process of cause and effect. And what we're doing is one set of causes. We're developing one set of causes. We call it the practice, the development of the Eightfold Path. And the Buddha said, if you develop the Eightfold Path well, properly, correctly, you're guaranteed to free your mind from suffering, because it's just a process of cause and effect, cause and result. If the causes are correct, the result, the right result will come. There's no person in that. There's no being. There's no me, you, us or them. It's just the law of nature, cause and result. You establish mindfulness, the sense of self dissolves, and then suffering disappears. No mindfulness, no wisdom, suffering takes over. So just as suffering has its cause and its end, the end of suffering, the path that leads to the end of suffering, freedom from suffering also has its cause. So all of us are in the same position, whether you're a monk, a nun, layman, laywoman. We all have to create the right causes if we want to get beyond suffering. We have to get to the point where our mind is seeing a thought as just a thought, not grasping at it. Feeling is just a feeling, the body is just the body. Earlier tonight we chanted the Buddha's words on loving kindness, the Meta Suitor. That was given on the occasion when a group of monks went into the forest and they were not yet enlightened. So they're just ordinary people, unenlightened monks. They've got the robes, they've got the shaven head, but they're still full of views and opinions and their own defilements. And they went into the forest, and it was a forest, probably quite a beautiful forest. But like all forests, there were what we call forest devas living there, these beings that live in trees. And the monks were a bit disrespectful of the place, not sure what they were up to. Maybe they were not practicing very much, talking too loudly, making a bit of a mess. Perhaps they were leaning against the trees. Perhaps they were going to the toilet in the wrong place, making a smell or mess. So after a while, they all started to experience this really strong, pungent, unpleasant smell being emanated from the forest. And this smell gave them headaches, made them nauseous and feel sick. In the end, they couldn't stay there. It was just too unpleasant. They felt too ill. So they packed up and left. And they went back to the Buddha. I think he was staying at Jetavana Monastery. And the Buddha saw them coming back into the monastery. He saw they all looked pretty sickly and they're holding their head and rubbing their tummies, and their skin looked a pale colour. So he said, "What's wrong?" And they said, "Well, when they went to the forest and they all started to feel sick, and there was a terrible smell there, and the atmosphere was awful, couldn't stay there." And the Buddha knew exactly what had happened. They'd gone and they weren't very mindful yet, not very restrained, talking too much, not practicing meditation, not studying, not doing their chanting. And you realize that the beings that lived in that forest weren't impressed at all. These monks were not respectful, not well practiced. So he gave them the teaching. He said, "Oh, you've got to go back to that forest, but this time you've got to go with a heart of loving kindness for all beings. You've got to have a mind with peace, respect, kindness, compassion, all those qualities we chant in the Buddha's words on loving kindness." He said, "Go and recite this teaching, and it will put you in the right frame of mind to practice, and then all those beings in that forest, they'll be happy too. And things will be totally different if you go back and use this teaching." So they did, and the forest became very pleasant to stay. And they thought, "Oh, what beautiful trees and beautiful atmosphere, it's peaceful," and and their meditation went well from then on. So our starting attitude, whether we're monks or lay people, has to be one of goodwill. Goodwill for ourselves, goodwill for others. And this is what we call a wholesome state of mind, or a skillful state of mind, when you have goodwill. And really, meditation practice is synonymous with developing goodwill. Of course, we talk about all the other qualities: mindfulness, investigation of the Dhamma, contemplation of the three characteristics, and so on. Developing energy and rapture and samadhi and equanimity. But really, we have to start from a place of goodwill. Goodwill for ourselves, goodwill for others. Because our background for all of us is that we're kind of rooted in self-criticism, even self-hatred. And as soon as we meditate, that starts to come out. If we can't blame someone else, we'll blame ourselves for our problems, because we're seeing our problems for the first time, or seeing them more clearly for the first time. We don't like what we see, and we all have results-orientated thinking, because our education system and society now kind of encourages us to always look to be ambitious for success. We want praise, fame and fortune, success in what we do. We want good results. We want to make money. We want to get promoted, get to the top of the ladder, be successful, to be somebody. So we bring that way of thinking into our meditation. And we sit down and then we see lots of thinking, all kinds of feelings, all kinds of sensations in the body, and our mind is all over the place, and then we're not satisfied with what we see, so we blame ourselves, immediately turn on ourselves, and the metta disappears. So we have to start from a place of metta, goodwill. That means tolerance. And we have to look after this quality of goodwill as we meditate, just like a mother protects her baby. We have to look after our metta like it's a baby. Protect it with our life. Whatever happens, however many negative thoughts come up, however self-critical we are, however many pains in the leg and aches and pains we have in this body, however unpeaceful our mind is, we have to preserve our goodwill in order to succeed in meditation. You have to have goodwill for others. So all those people who normally annoy you and irritate you, you have to establish goodwill and keep the goodwill, protect it with your life, and the goodwill for yourself. You're one person in the equation, whether it's yourself or others. Equally, you have to have goodwill. This is how the Buddha practiced. He said he practiced this for many, many lifetimes as a bodhisattva, developing his goodwill for all beings in all directions, even the ones that are annoying, cause us trouble, but mostly for ourselves, because who do we know best? It's ourselves. And who gives us the most suffering? It's ourselves. We do it to ourselves. We hold on to those negative thoughts. We judge ourselves. We blame ourselves for thinking too much, not being mindful. I'm not mindful. I'm too greedy. I'm too angry. I'm too upset. I'm too sleepy. Especially at this time of night, everyone starts to fall asleep. Sometimes I have to give Dhamma talks and I'm competing with the sound of snoring. Or as Ajahn Sumedho used to say, when you give a Dhamma talk, everyone's bobbing around like corpses on the ocean. But whatever it is, whatever the hindrance, the problem is, if we lose our goodwill, then we start blaming ourselves. I'm hopeless, I'm no good, I've got no merit. Dhamma is not for me, the Buddhism is not for me. Maybe I should try something else. Maybe I should go hang gliding or take a cookery course. That will be much easier. Meditation is just too difficult. So as soon as we lose our goodwill, then our energy and effort starts to slip. So the Buddha said, preserve your goodwill like a mother preserves her baby. Just like the ducks here, when they have chicks, you go near them and the mother duck goes for you, even though the mother duck is tiny compared to you. She'll sacrifice everything to protect her chicks. We have to protect our wholesome state of mind, our goodwill, with our own effort. You have to see that as you meditate. You have to see the value of that, preserving goodwill as a basis for practice. You build from there. And of course, you need to put effort into developing mindfulness and then contemplating the Dhamma, investigating the three characteristics, anicca, impermanence, dukkha, unsatisfactoriness, anatta, not self. But it has to come from a place of goodwill. It can't come up from a place of grasping, craving, with strong sense of self. Sometimes we try to meditate with willpower and just make our mind peaceful and concentrated, force out every negative thought from the mind, squash the mind, force the mind, bully the mind. It doesn't work, does it? After a while you feel miserable, feel drained, uninspired. You don't want to do it anymore because it's not natural and it's not pleasant. So it's another reflection in your practice. If things are not going so well, come back to goodwill as a starting point. Re-establish goodwill, just as you re-establish mindfulness on the breath or mindfulness on the perception of impermanence. You can also re-establish mindfulness on the intention of goodwill directed to yourself and others. And things start to lighten up a bit. When you have goodwill, even if you have a lot of thoughts, or you're sleepy, or you have pain in the legs, you can tolerate it better, you can cope with it better if you have a mind of goodwill. You have some sympathy for yourself or sympathy for others meditating around you. If there is somebody who seems to be going well in their practice, well, you have mudita for them. Karuna, mudita, they come out of metta. These are the Brahma Viharas, and these are the foundations for a wholesome state of mind and for developing insight. You can't develop insight from willpower or the controlling mind. This is the sense of self. This is the opposite of insight. It's just me, me, me. I'm going to destroy the defilements through my strong mind. We might develop that attitude as we go to work. We're going to beat everything and be the top dog in the office or the workplace, get on in life and make our million. But that's coming from craving and attachment. If you bring that into your mind when you meditate, your mind very quickly burns out. You can't do it. You can't meditate with anger for others. You can't meditate with anger for yourself. It won't work. So we have to calm ourselves down through goodwill and then introduce mindfulness and then introduce insight. And these qualities work together very well, like friends. Goodwill, mindfulness, insight into impermanence. They fit together very well in the mind. They support each other. Because when you develop goodwill, you start to relax a bit. You let go, you can smile a bit. In Thailand, they say, the teachers say, when your mind is peaceful, it's smiling. Chit yim. You know, it's like a little smiley face inside because you let go of your anger, your ill will, your irritation. May not yet be fully enlightened, but the mind is at ease within itself. So it's like it's smiling. And if the mind is peaceful like that, at ease, you can sustain that for a long time. Even if you do have some pain in your body, or you're feeling tired or sleepy, or you have a lot of thoughts bothering you, if you can find that place of ease and just keep going, then you can face all your problems. But you have to preserve the goodwill. You have to do that. See the value of doing that. So we can't force ourselves to go to enlightenment. We can't fight our way through, although we do put a lot of effort into our practice. So it's a form of fighting, true, but generally we associate the idea of fighting with aversion. We can't achieve it through aversion or willpower. It has to come through a more subtle kind of effort. The effort, just like the mother preserving her baby. There's certainly effort and a struggle there, but it's coming from love, from goodwill. Just like those monks in the forest who were at first very heedless, and they just ended up with headaches and stomach aches. And we tend to be like that often in our meditation. We sit down and we're so frustrated with life, and we bring that attitude in to our meditation. Straight away the mind falls into negativity. Maybe you see some old mental habits coming up and you feel tired having to keep looking at your same old mental habits. But that's the reason you feel tired, is because you've lost the metta at that point. You've lost the goodwill. When you bring up the goodwill, you're willing to tolerate even your own negativity, bad memories, pain in the leg, pain in the back, or just being a pain. If you can develop the goodwill inside, internally, then even if you're engaged with other people, through our day, even on a meditation retreat, you mix with other people, it's easier to be tolerant of others around you, even though they may not be particularly mindful or skilled in their practice. You can tolerate them. You can be at ease with them. Everything starts to go better. Really, the practice of Dhamma is, for us, it's easy in the sense the Buddha has done all the hard work first. He had a very difficult job because he didn't have a teacher. He learned with the foremost teachers of the day in India. The best meditation masters taught him jhana, but they couldn't bring him to enlightenment because they lacked some of the wisdom. They hadn't penetrated these Four Noble Truths. And he realized that. He studied with them until they recognized he's just as good or better than them in the meditation. But he could see they still have a conceit, self-view based around their attainment of samadhi. They still hadn't cut off attachment to the world. So off he went on his own to practice, and that's where he developed this insight into the Four Noble Truths. So craving and attachment is the root cause of our suffering. But he did that through his great effort, his wisdom, his compassion, and then he came to teach us. Even the Buddha said he didn't actually create the Dhamma or make it happen. It's not like he's some special person. He was just somebody who discovered the truth. The truth is already there. It's not like he brought it into existence. The truth was there already. It's just nobody had discovered it. Nobody had realized it. So for us, it's not like we have to go and find some mysterious truth somewhere else, like in another planet or another universe or something. The truth of the Dhamma is there already for us. And then the path that will help reveal that truth is already laid out for us by the Buddha. So everything is in place for us to practice. All we need to do is put effort into the practice to prove what the Buddha taught does get you to seeing the truth, freeing your mind from delusion, greed, anger, delusion. He didn't encourage us just to believe what he said either. He said you have to practice it until you know for yourself. So his teachings came from kindness and compassion for other beings. He could have just sat there under the Bodhi tree, saved himself a lot of trouble, just enjoyed his enlightenment experience. But he didn't. He came out to teach, pass on his experience, his understanding to others, put himself to a lot of trouble because some people liked what he said, some people didn't, some people agreed, some people argued with him, some people competed with him because they were jealous of him. He had to go through a lot of suffering to get the Dhamma out there, get people to see the Dhamma, practice the Dhamma. But of course, he wasn't suffering in his mind, but he just put himself through difficulty and hardship. No way around it. That all came from compassion for us. Now we have to take these teachings and put them to the test ourselves. So if you're meditating and you start to have more, you start to judge yourself, have more self-aversion, and that gives rise to more doubt. Can I really do this? Is it worth it? All this effort, sitting, walking, meditation, keeping precepts, listening to Dhamma, is it really worth it? And when the doubts come up, you have to just patiently be with them, come back to the goodwill, the mindfulness, and just watch. Even doubt is just another mental state, isn't it? If you believe it and get lost in it, it will just take you around in circles and drain you of all your energy, and you won't get any solution. Because doubt, in its nature, is doubt, skeptical doubt, uncertainty about the practice. We have to come back to square one, recognize doubt as doubt, and let it go. One thing the Buddha said is that you can do this. Everything he taught is something that we can do as human beings. He didn't teach some special practice that only a few people have the ability to do. Everyone has the ability, everyone can do it. It's just whether you have the willingness, the interest, the faith to try. So no one is born innately defiled and just destined to suffer forever and ever, even though it feels like that. When you have a mood of despair, you think, this is all I know, it's going to be like this. I've reached the end of my life, my end of everything good in the world. My life is hopeless. And despair is like that. But I imagine most people, they've had times in life when things went wrong and they had despair, but then it passes, doesn't it? Even the worst kind of despair, depression, is still what we call a sankhara. It's a mental state, a mental condition that arises and ceases. So if you've had despair before and you're sitting listening to this talk right now, you should be able to recognize this simple fact that despair arose and passed away. It was an emotion and it may have been very unpleasant, but it's not permanent. And what's not permanent is not a self. So it's not like we're born destined to be in a state of woe and despair forever and ever. And things do go wrong. We go through unpleasant experiences and we experience despair, disappointment, misery, but then it passes. And that's why you can practice Dhamma. Because however bad the despair, the suffering gets, it's still sankhara. It arises, it passes away. That's why you need to keep coming back to the goodwill, the patience, the mindfulness, the effort, the wisdom. Reflect on it. Is this really me? Or is this a mental state? Mental states are just mental states, even the worst ones, the worst despair, the worst disappointment you might experience. It arises and it passes away. It's not a self in the sense it's not a permanent self. It's unpleasant when it's there, but it doesn't last forever. The delusion is when you grasp it as self, you identify with it, or you keep feeding it, so it seems like it keeps staying in your mind, returning. That's coming from delusion. The quicker you establish mindfulness and recognize you're actually making it worse by holding on to it, then you'll start letting go. So whether it's uncertainty and doubt, can't make a decision on something, can't decide to do something, whether it's despair at some unpleasant situation that's arisen, try your best to establish mindfulness and see it is just thoughts, mental states arising, passing away. And if you've seen it once, you know it once, then you can do it again and again and again. And after a while, the mind gets the message and it says, oh, this is not self. the practice of insight, developing insight. It's using these perceptions as tools, recognizing the impermanent, changing nature of mental states, feelings, physical sensations, recognizing the unsatisfactory nature, the lack of true happiness in them, recognizing the lack of self. What's impermanent cannot be a self. It's not saying there's nothing there. You may feel lousy from time to time. So that feeling, it's not saying the feeling is not true. It's just there's no self in it. If you can bring your mind to take one step back and recognize that, then the suffering starts to fade. When the suffering fades, what's left? Well, goodwill, mindfulness, wisdom, all the good qualities are left. Just like those monks in the forest with the bad smell and the headaches. Changing the attitude to one of goodwill, developing a more positive attitude to their situation, suddenly the suffering lifted. You know, all those words we chanted tonight, humble, not conceited, easy to teach, easily satisfied, frugal, not demanding, not proud, developing goodwill to all beings, whether they're high or low, near or far, coarse or refined. You like them, you don't like them. You know, the mind of the meditator is like this. In the end, you just send out goodwill in all directions. So this is part of the practice, preserving goodwill rather than preserving aversion, irritation, despair. Those qualities don't need to be preserved. You just let them go. So I'll leave you with these reflections tonight, and we can end the session here, and then tomorrow morning, 6 a.m. Melbourne time, we'll be back with morning chanting and meditation. If you've got the energy, you can carry on meditating tonight, but the live stream is going to end in a moment.
Handamayan Dhamma Kataya Sadhu Param Dharamase Sadhu 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 Anumodami